So, let's dive into this really fascinating legal case. It all starts with a group of medical students who do something, well, impossible. They get perfect scores on their licensing exam. But their celebration gets cut short by a pretty shocking accusation, one that kicks off a legal war that would drag on for an entire decade.
I mean, just imagine it. You've spent years studying. You've finally passed the most important exam of your life, the one thing standing between you and your dream of being a doctor. And you don't just pass, you absolutely crush it. But instead of getting that license to practice, you get an investigation. So yeah, what happens when being the best just isn't enough? That's the real question here.
Okay, so let's set the scene. We're in the Philippines. It's February 1993. A whole group of graduates from the Fatima College of Medicine takes their big physician licensure exam. They get the results back, and it looks like they're on the home stretch to becoming registered doctors. You know, everything seems to be going exactly to plan.
But then, the Professional Regulation Commission, or PRC, that's the government body that runs these exams, they start looking at the scores. And they notice something. Something that isn't just a little weird, but is, well, it's statistically unbelievable. This is what they saw: 100% perfect scores, and not just one, but a whole bunch of them. And get this, it was in the two most notoriously difficult subjects on the entire exam, biochemistry and obstetrics gynecology. This was completely unheard of. I mean, it was a record-breaking phenomenon in the entire history of the medical board exam there.
And this chart, wow, it really shows you the sheer gap. When the board put Fatima College's results up against every other medical school in the country, the difference was just staggering. The Fatima scores weren't just high, they were a total anomaly, a statistical outlier so extreme that it demanded some kind of explanation.
Let's just break down how wild these numbers really were. Okay, so 11 students got a perfect 100 in biochemistry. 10 students got a perfect 100 in OB-GYN. On top of that, tons of others were scoring 95% or higher. And maybe the craziest part, not a single person from Fatima scored below 90% in these subjects. This wasn't just a class of geniuses. Something else was going on.
So, results this extraordinary, they immediately set off alarm bells. The PRC just couldn't ignore it. They had to figure out what happened.
And the PRC's response was fast. First thing they did, they put a hold on all the Fatima graduates' licenses. No one's getting one just yet. Then they brought in the big guns, a top statistician to crunch the numbers, and the National Bureau Investigation, think of them as the Philippines FBI, to look for any signs of wrongdoing.
So, the statistician, Father Bienvenido Nebres, he takes one look and basically concludes that these results were not natural. He reported that the scores were all bunched up at the very top, and that just defies the laws of probability. He said there had to be some outside factor at play, something so powerful that it completely erased the normal differences in skill and preparation you'd expect to see among students.
And the NBI's conclusion? It was blunt. After their investigation, they said the only logical explanation for these impossibly high scores was that the Fatima students had somehow gotten their hands on the test questions ahead of time. The accusation was crystal clear: mass cheating.
Now you might think that's the end of the story, right? But faced with these findings, the students didn't back down. Oh no. Instead, they took the PRC to court, and that kicked off this incredibly complex legal tug-of-war that would last for over 10 years.
The student's weapon of choice in this fight was something called a writ of mandamus. So what is that? Well, it's basically a court order you can get to force the government agency to do its job. The student's argument was really simple. Hey, we passed the exam. The law says if you pass, you get a license. The PRC has a legal duty to give us our licenses, and we're asking the court to make them do it, period.
And what a battle it turned out to be. It all starts in 1993. A year later, a lower court actually sides with the students. But the PRC appeals, and for the next 6 years, the case just bounces around the court system through this maze of appeals and counter-appeals, until finally, in 2004, it lays right in the lap of the Supreme Court of the Philippines. And this decade of legal fighting wasn't just about exam scores anymore. It had boiled down to a much more fundamental question, a huge disagreement over the very nature of a professional license.
This is the question the Supreme Court had to answer. If you check all the boxes and pass the test, is the government forced to give you a license as a matter of right? Or is a license a privilege, something the state has the power to grant or even withhold, all to protect the public?
So, here are the two arguments, side by side. The students said the PRC's duty was ministerial, basically a simple automatic checklist. They passed, so the PRC must issue the license. It has no choice. But the PRC argued their duty was discretionary. They said a license is a privilege, and their job is to make sure a candidate is truly qualified, which includes things like integrity and moral character. They pointed out that the law says passing has to be satisfactory, and that means a lot more than just having the right answers.
So, after a decade of all this back and forth, the Supreme Court was finally ready to issue its verdict and settle this huge question once and for all.
And their ruling was decisive. In this really powerful statement, the court declared that a license to practice medicine is not a right. It is a privilege granted by the government. And that single sentence fundamentally sided with the PRC's argument. You know, it's funny how sometimes these massive cases can hinge on the meaning of a single word. And for this one, that word was satisfactorily. The law says a candidate must have satisfactorily passed the exam. So the court zoomed right in on what that truly means.
And they defined it like this. Satisfactorily means more than just hitting a certain score. It means passing in a way that is capable of dispelling doubt. So, given the huge cloud of doubt hanging over these exam results, the court found that the students had not, in fact, satisfactorily passed.
So the court's reasoning was really clear. They said the PRC's job isn't just to be a rubber stamp, it has discretion. Passing a medical exam is about more than just your score. It's about proving your moral fitness to be a doctor. And most importantly, the state has a deep, profound duty to regulate professions like medicine to keep the public safe. The massive doubts about the exam's integrity were more than enough reason for the PRC to do what it did. And so, the final verdict came down. The students' request for that writ of mandamus was denied. After a 10-year fight, the court ruled that the Professional Regulation Commission was not legally required to issue them licenses to practice medicine. The case was over. You know, this case leaves us with a huge question, one that goes way beyond this one exam. In any critical field, medicine, law, engineering, you name it, the government has to balance the rights of a person to pursue their career with its duty to protect all of us from someone who might be dishonest or incompetent. This case from 1993 gave a really powerful answer, but that debate over where exactly we should draw that line, well, that continues to this day.